Imagine a quiet place, not the kind of silence that calms, but the kind that weighs heavy, a silence where the soul screams and no one hears. That is where many live, smiling on the outside, suffocating on the inside. How many times have you erased yourself to avoid disappointing others? How many times have you swallowed your own pain just to maintain the peace of others? Today, we're going to talk about this, about the boundaries you fear to set, about the strength that lies in saying, "Enough," without raising your voice. This video is not about anger, nor about revenge. It's about balance. It's about clarity. It's about the wisdom of those who understand that protecting their peace is nobler than pleasing the entire world. If you've ever felt used, manipulated, or simply exhausted from trying to be everything to everyone, then this video is for you. Here, silence becomes a lesson, and pain becomes direction. Welcome to your turning point. Welcome to your place of silent strength. Let's begin. Not every withdrawal is an escape. In many cases, it is a gesture of self-respect. There are moments when silence is more powerful than any explanation, and stepping back from a situation does not signify weakness, but self-control. Think about how many times you have worn yourself out trying to make yourself understood by those who were not ready to listen. How many times you stayed in environments that drained your energy just to maintain appearances or avoid judgment. And in the midst of it all, you lost yourself, trying to sustain connections that only existed when it was convenient for the other person. There is a silent dignity in simply stopping the insistence. Let's imagine Sophia's story. She was one of those people who always held onto the rope of friendship, relationships, and family, even when the other side had already let go. She was the one who responded quickly, showed up, and asked if everything was okay, even after being ignored. Multiple times. At work, even though she was a highly sought-after interior designer, she lived trying to please clients who didn't value her time. At home, she insisted on maintaining a bond with a partner who always seemed emotionally absent. Until one day, while observing her own reflection in an elevator with tired eyes and a heavy heart, she asked herself, "What if I just stopped?" Not out of pride, nor out of anger, but out of self-love. She began slowly, without announcing anything, without creating a scene. She stopped initiating conversations, stopped justifying her withdrawal. She stopped explaining herself to those who couldn't care less. And something curious happened. Some disappeared without even noticing. Others noticed and demanded, "You disappeared," but didn't ask how she was doing. And that was enough for her to understand who truly cared. Sophia didn't make speeches or confrontations. She simply withdrew in peace. And over time, something blossomed inside her, serenity. She was no longer at war, trying to fit in. She was at peace in her own space. Silence, when guided by awareness, has a power that reorganizes everything around it. It filters what is real and what was only sustained by your insistence. And more than that, it reveals. When you stop chasing after others, their true intentions become clear. When you stop explaining yourself, you realize who was merely waiting for a flaw to distance themselves. Silence is not revenge, it is maturity, and those who learn to use it discover they no longer need to prove anything to anyone. It is a bitter lesson at first, especially if you grew up with the idea that you must please everyone. But over time, it transforms into freedom. Freedom from being consumed by one-sided relationships, from being subjected to cycles of emotional exhaustion. Withdrawing without fanfare is a way of reclaiming yourself. It is not about giving up on people, but about not abandoning yourself for them. When Sophia stopped trying to convince others of her worth, she began to meet herself more often. It's curious how inner peace starts to blossom once we understand that we do not need to explain ourselves in order to be respected. The right people understand. The wrong ones distort, even with all the arguments in the world. And it is precisely there that life begins to lighten. What was once spent trying to prove loyalty, show intentions, and clarify misunderstandings was now converted into quality time with herself. Reading a book without interruptions, walking without waiting for a message that never arrives, silencing the mind without justifying absences. This in itself is a relief that heals. Many times, trying to make oneself understood by those who lack the emotional capacity is like shouting in a tunnel with no echo. You speak, and everything returns empty. Worse, sometimes it returns distorted. How many times have you found yourself justifying your reaction to unfair actions? How many times have you had to pretend not to care just to avoid conflict? And deep down, all you wanted was reciprocity. But the truth is, those who want to understand listen even to silence. Those who don't won't even hear your tears. There is something profoundly liberating in no longer trying to carry dying relationships on your back. It is not selfishness, it is emotional health. Sophia realized this when months after her silence, some people began to appear. Not to rebuild bridges, but to demand overdue explanations. Why did you disappear? You've changed. You're so distant. But none of them asked, "Are you okay?" That is the difference. Those who truly care do not demand presence, they offer support. Those who only seek control demand explanations. It was at that moment that she realized she didn't need to return. The withdrawal wasn't temporary, it was a new way of life, one where her peace was worth more than any forced bond. The truth is, we grow up believing that maintaining connections is a sign of maturity. But true maturity is knowing when to let go. It does no good to hold onto a rope that only hurts your hands. Emotionally, many people are bleeding, trying to keep something alive that has long since died. But they are afraid of silence. They fear appearing cold, when in truth they are simply exhausting themselves. Silence is often mistaken for coldness, but it is one of the greatest acts of self-love. It does not scream, but it speaks volumes. It does not accuse, but it sets boundaries. And those who do not respect your silence never respected your words. So if you've reached this point in your journey, where you feel like you're always giving more than you receive, always trying to explain yourself, always seeking understanding from those who have already given up on understanding you, perhaps it's time to stop, not with anger, but with serenity, because what remains standing when you stop insisting is what truly has roots. The rest? It was only sustained by your presence. By the way, if you've made it this far in the video, it's because something inside you is already awakening. So take this moment and subscribe to the channel, but not because it's the law or because everyone asks. Subscribe because this kind of content might be saying exactly what you needed to hear today. And if this video has touched you in any way, comment below. What was the moment in your life when you too decided to withdraw in silence? How was it for you? Share with us, because your story might be the breath of courage someone else needs right now. And here, your voice matters. What is most surprising when you decide to withdraw in silence is how clarity begins to emerge in details once overlooked. Sophia, already accustomed to the emotional noise of certain relationships, began to notice how much calmer the world is. When you no longer have to walk on eggshells, she stopped replying to messages that only arrived when someone needed something. She stopped feeling guilty for not engaging in conversations that ended in demands. And little by little, she felt that the silence, which once hurt, was becoming a light but firm armor, a kind of protection that doesn't push the world away, but filters what is worth keeping close. It's curious how, when we stop trying to prove our worth, much of what once mattered loses its importance. That external opinion that once hurt now feels like nothing more than a distant noise. That criticism that once paralyzed now is simply a projection of someone who has never looked at themselves. It is at this point that we understand that solitude is not a punishment. In fact, it is a necessary passage for reconstruction. And it is there, in the midst of this fertile silence, that we truly find ourselves. We discover new tastes, new thoughts, new boundaries, and we begin to choose our companions more wisely, not for their lack of flaws, but for their presence of respect. Sophia realized this when she started to value simpler encounters, sincere conversations, and small gestures, full of truth. She no longer wanted to be everywhere with everyone at any cost. She wanted to be whole wherever she was. She wanted to look at herself in the mirror and feel peace, not that tiredness from a life lived trying to please others. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the permission to leave without making a sound. No final speech, no farewell sign. Just leave. Because the soul knows when it is no longer welcome, even if the environment smiles. The deepest lesson this process teaches is that silence is not absence. It is the presence of self. When you stop insisting on being seen, you begin to see yourself more clearly. And when you truly see yourself, the world changes color. Relationships change tone. You stop accepting emotional crumbs. You stop settling for empty presences. And you learn that the best place to be is where your essence does not need to be edited. And perhaps this is the great secret no one has told you. You do not need to exhaust yourself to be valued. You do not need to beg for attention, force connection, or ask for space. What is real remains even in silence. What is true understands, even without explanation. And what is love, truly, will never make you feel small for existing as you are. So if you are at this point in your journey where you feel that silence has been your only form of protection, know that you are not alone. There is immense strength within you, a strength that is simply waiting for you to stop hiding behind justifications. Breathe deeply, trust yourself, let go of what hurts, embrace what heals, and remember, you deserve peace, even if it costs a few goodbyes. If this video has spoken to you in any way, I invite you to be part of this community. Subscribe to the channel, not out of obligation, but because here we build together a space for reflection, strength, and support, a place where stories matter and silences are respected. And since you've made it this far, tell us, what have you learned from silence? What was the moment you realized you needed to protect yourself emotionally? Your story may light the way for someone going through this phase right now, so share with us. Let's grow together, honestly, firmly, but also lightly, because sometimes all someone needs is a word that says, "I've been through that too." You are welcome here.